Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. Here's the president of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, John DeNuzzo.
Welcome to Lake George Battlefield Moments. Our guest is Mark Silo, historian and very active member of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. He's the author of the book, The 115th New York in the Civil War, which is the unit history of a local Civil War regiment. Mark has focused the past few years on determining the location of British battle lines during the Battle of Lake George, most notably in his landmark article, Sir William, Where Exactly Were Your Lines?, that appeared in the winter 2023 edition of the Fort George Post, our journal. That's available on our website. So we appreciate that landmark research, and we welcome you, Mark.
Well, thank you. Great to be here.
All right. Now, after several years, it seems that you've evolved your presentations on the 1755 Battle of Lake George lines to an emphasis on how today's landscapes differ or remain present and visible from those back in the 18th century. Is that true, and are they dramatically different?
Mostly, it's fairly well preserved. There are a couple of spots that are dramatically different, but thanks to some land acquisition done by the state of New York in the 1890s, we have a pretty well preserved area now. That's the campground, the Battlefield Park, and into the $1 Million Beach area. It never became developed as the rest of the village has. It's a pretty natural state. And if you look at some of the period maps from the 1750s, and they show terrain features, you can pick them out. They're still there. Probably most notably preserved is the road. It's now Fort George Road that runs from Route 9 down to the lake shore at Beach Road. That's in exactly the same spot, that 1 mile or so stretch, that it was in 1755. It was originally a portage path for unknown generations of Native Americans to take them from the Hudson River at what's now Fort Edward here to the Lake George. In 1755, when that British American Army came up here, they widened that last stretch of road, the 14 miles from Fort Edward, to accommodate their wagons and their artillery. And it's been in use ever since.
Wow, interesting. So that Fort George Road you mentioned, the old military road, I mean, that's basically the same thing that William Johnson, when they first came up from Fort Edward, which was then Fort Lyman, I believe,
yes,
in 1755, that basically they were surrounded by virgin forest, were they not?
Yeah, generally, yes. It was virgin forest. It had that long-used native path, but they widened it and turned it into what in the 18th century was a more modern road. And armies followed year after year during the French and Indian War. Every year, 1755 through 1760, actually, armies came through here, camped at the shore of Lake George. So it was very busy.
Maybe the most well-known visage of Lake George Battlefield Park today is the sculpture of William Johnson and King Hendrik. Is that randomly placed where it is, or does that have some significance as to where it's located?
No, it is located at the approximate place where Johnson had his headquarters tent while they were encamped here from late August into the mid-September of 1755.
Now, I know your most in-depth research on the battle has been at Lake George, the Battlegrounds Campground, Battlefield Park, and so forth. But an earlier skirmish that same day, the Bloody Morning Scout location in modern-day Queensbury, and the end-of-day encounter at Bloody Pond are other elements of the full Battle of Lake George. So tell us about the Bloody Morning Scout site.
And the Bloody Morning Scout involved about 1,000 of General Johnson's men he sent from here at Lake George to relieve what he thought was going to be a French assault at Fort Lyman / Fort Edward. Both sides had scouts running through these woods and keeping an eye on each other, and the French got the upper hand when they discovered through their scouts that this relief force was on the way to intercept them. Well, they turned the table and hid in the woods along the path that British American force would be taking and ambushed them at a site about 3 miles from the lake along the old Colonial Road. And that part of the battle, the morning phase, became known as the Bloody Morning Scout.
And what does that name, Bloody Morning Scout, mean?
Well, the British American force again was sent to scout out the French force and intercept them, and they were intercepted and took pretty heavy casualties, so it became quite bloody. So the Bloody Morning Scout it remains.
Got it. Okay, so the British were ambushed basically, and those who survived that ambush, fled to the north, brought them back to the head of Lake George, where ultimately the British provincial forces under William Johnson made their stand. We have two principals from that Bloody Morning Scout who perished in that, correct, from the British side?
The leader was Colonel Ephraim Williams, the man who endowed Williams College. He led the force. He was one of the first ones killed. There's a monument at that site, or at least as near as they can judge where that site was, is a obelisk monument up on a very large boulder just down the hill from Route 9, which is on the hillside above the ravine where the action took place. That area is owned by Williams College, and they take very good care of it. There's a very good path down from Route 9 to the memorial. It's well maintained and has some very interesting interpretive signage.
So that is accessible for people. If so, how do they access it?
It's very accessible. There is a pullout with a couple of parking spaces on the east side of Route 9. It's maybe 2 miles south of where exit 21 is. It's easily spotted. And the path goes right from that pull out along Route 9 just a short way down to the monument.
I see. So, as I said, the British flee back north, those who survived that first attack. The Battle of Lake George, the Battle of Johnson's Camp, as you've labeled it, happens here, and that's really the turning point, if you will, where the British provincials emerge victorious. Dieskau, the French, their commander is wounded, taken captive, and ultimately the French and their native allies lose confidence, and they're the ones who start backing away. And then the third phase happens, Bloody Pond. What's Bloody Pond about?
The assault by the French on the British American lines here at Lake George was about 4 or 5 hours all afternoon. After a while, they weren't making any inroads, and some of the French and their Canadian and Native American allies started to pull back. It was about that time that Dieskau, the French commander, was wounded. A couple of his men propped him up against a tree for safekeeping. Some of the British American force, as the French retreated, followed them. They apparently hadn't had enough of fighting in those 5-6 hours, and they discovered Dieskau and took him prisoner. At the same time, there was a relief force coming up from Fort Edward. They heard the shooting and sent a few hundred men up to try to help Johnson's force. Both of those forces of British Americans squeezed the French as they retreated. They went a couple miles south of the village here to try to retrieve their packs and their supplies, and they met Americans shooting at them from both directions. Legend has it that many of the bodies were thrown into a pond that was down there, and it turned red with their blood, and it became known, as it is still known today, as Bloody Pond.
And is that location accessible for people to visit?
That location is more of a mystery. We're really not quite sure where it was. There's a pond adjacent to Route 9 that has a sign and a monument there that label it as Bloody Pond, but there's a lot of doubt as to that location. In fact, with the road construction, there's a railroad in there. The drainage characteristics of that whole area were drastically changed over time. Even some of the research by one of our alliance members named John Eric Nelson, what he discovered was that in the first few years after that fight, people that were involved and wrote about it didn't even use the word pond. They used the word swamp or depression like that, but pond came into use later. So it's a lot of doubt as to what that body of water may have looked like and where exactly it was.
Okay. Well, Bloody Pond resonates Probably better than bloody depression. Anyways.
I'm sure it does.
All right. Now, there's a long-term objective the Alliance shares with you of installing more signage at all 3 Battle of Lake George skirmish sites to better educate the public. Are you optimistic that could happen?
I'm optimistic. We have some signage that's gone in already. We have a couple of new signs right outside the visitor center in the battlefield park that are really attractive and hopefully long-lasting signs. We have a lot of willing partners that would like to see that happen, including Warren County and Williams College and local municipalities. We're working with them, and they own some of the property that would be involved. We have some other property owners that are supportive but have perhaps conflicting priorities. They're trying to maintain power lines, safe power lines. In the case of National Grid, they're trying to maintain a natural environment in the case of New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. But we're in touch with all of them, and I do think we'll get somewhere.
Well, that's good news. I share your optimism. All right, so some of you will be attending Mark Silo's tour, Battle of Lake George, Then and Now. That's coming up on May the 9th. These are very popular tours, and officially this one, the 2 of them on May the 9th are sold out. If you'd like to get on a waiting list for those days, those tours, or learn about future opportunities, just mail us at info@lakegeorgebattlefield.org, and we'll keep you on the list. Mark Silo, thanks for all you do in support of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance.
It's a pleasure. It's my retirement hobby. I love it.
All right. Well, we love having you. Our website, lakegeorgebattlefield.org. We thank you for being a part of our history.
Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. For more information or to check out the latest podcast, go to lakegeorgebattlefield.org. And listen live on Saturday mornings to Lake George Battlefield Moments on 93.5 Lake FM.